don't get sued by your first hire. You're a new startup founder. You are excited about this amazing person that you found. It's all love, roses, and chocolate. Or we know that sometimes ends badly. Let's even start by some of your war stories.
So, the thing that governs employer and employee relationships is an employment contract.
Yeah.
Regardless of how you characterize it or how you have it on paper, the only people you have an employment relationship with are the people that you have a contract of employment with.
What are some pitfalls from an employment perspective that either employers or employees often don't consider or even have conversations on prior to signing that dotted line?
Employees, bright and eager, and they really want to do this thing, they just jump into your ship without even asking for a contract. So when you ask them to leave and they come and say, I'm entitled to
X amount.
Yes. The person says, I'm entitled to a bonus. If there's nothing in your contract of employment that says that this person will be entitled to bonuses in the year that they leave, they can't come and sue you for bonuses. Let them go to court.
Welcome to Periscope, the podcast that allows founders see what they may not already know. In these conversations, we tackle a range of topics from fundraising, finance, marketing, tech, even legal, to ensure that you have all the information that you need to scale your amazing idea from 0 to 100%. Today, we are discussing legal. My name is Lola, and I am the host of the show today. And with me, I have my co-host, Tosin.
Hi, my name is Tosin Iyayi. I'm a partner at Aluko Oyebode.
It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks.
The topic of our episode today is don't get sued by your first hire. You know, when startup founders kick off, they're looking for a co-founder for their early team, the founding team, and it's so important to them to find the right person.
Absolutely.
And it's all love, right? That first week, they found the right team, everybody's in love with each other, everything looks good. But it's very important to also realize that things can go wrong. And I'm
Absolutely.
sure you see that quite a bit.
A lot.
Yeah, and we all know cases of co-founders that have literally had very public breakups.
Yes.
Right? And we don't want that to happen to our audience, clearly. We want to be sure that they have all the information they need to protect themselves from the very beginning, so that when issues start to crop up, they can have that conversation in a very sort of neutral, not emotional way.
Before things start to get emotional, it's important to have your agreement, your contract. So if it's an employee, let's have a contract of employment. If it's a contractor, have an agreement. If it's your co-founder, have a co-founder's agreement. So what you don't want is to not have the terms guiding your relationship, your working relationship on paper. You want to have those terms written out clearly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because things can go wrong.
Absolutely.
Right.
Things always go wrong.
Yeah. And I think we should also realize that those documents should be living documents, right? Do you think, like, for example, the co-founders agreement can evolve? How often do you think that should be changed or updated?
So parties, to be honest, you don't have to set a timeline to it. As and when things come up or some of those terms change, or your circumstances change, you might want to revise your agreements. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yes, you can always have supplementary agreements.
Yeah. And I think the key one is what you mentioned around contractor agreement, especially when you outsource building.
Yes, that person isn't your employee. So it's important to clearly define what each person is, regardless of how you want to call them. But I'm sure we'll get into that later.
To be sure that you still own the IP.
Yes.
Because what you sometimes also see is you contract out a particular bill build of your, fancy,
Software,
flashy
yeah,
app,
yeah.
and the developer can hold you hostage
Yes.
if you don't have the right
You need to have the right
agreement in place to
agreement
protect
surrounding the
yourself.
intellectual property of whatever products you have. But
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah,
Oh,
I can't wait to deep dive into it.
Please, okay, nice.
There's a lot to unpack and to realize that also there are local labor laws,
Yes.
there are regulatory guidelines
Absolutely.
that should protect and guide you as you think about your relationship with either your co-founder or
Your contractor or your employee. Yes.
And where you incorporate also matters,
Yes,
right? Whether
yes.
you're in Delaware, in Nigeria, or some other jurisdiction.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd say that your first hire could be your blessing, and it could also be your first legal problem. So don't let that be you.
I can't wait to get started with you to deep dive into this topic.
I'm excited. I look forward to it.
Let's go. So Tosin, our topic for this conversation is don't get sued by your first hire, right? You're a new startup founder. You are excited about this amazing person that you found. It's all love, roses, and chocolates. But we know that sometimes ends badly.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's okay that there's conflict, that issues arise. That's all part of, just normal course of doing business. What's important is that you don't then want that to become a legal liability, right? Where you're now getting legal suits or you're getting all sorts of, pushback, issues, concerns, just a toxic end to that relationship. You have worked in dispute resolution for many, many years, and I'm sure you've seen lots of these cases.
I have.
So let's even start by some of your war stories.
Okay. So, the thing that governs employer and employee relationships is an employment contract.
Yeah.
But you find that sometimes there's really no employment contract, which in reality is because there's no employer-employee relationship between both parties.
What do you mean?
Right. There's times you have people who work with you who are not your employees. Sometimes
they're contractors, you mean?
Sometimes they're contractors. Sometimes they're seconded to you to work with you from maybe another organization, maybe a parent body or an offshore partner to come and understudy what you do. And they're not necessarily your employees. And sometimes you find that they turn around to sue you because they think that, and then they think that, well, I can claim some form of compensation. Maybe they don't like how they were let go or something, and they decide, you know what, I'm going to get my pound of flesh back.
Yeah, but you really can't let them go, right? If they're seconded to you, then...
Exactly. So there are times where the lines are blurred.
Okay.
Right? And I've actually at least seen one case where it wasn't that the person was asked to leave, but there was some kind of disciplinary measure taken against the person, right? And the person said, yes. And the person said, look, and then of course the employer asked them to go, their original employer. But the person turned around, not to sue their original employer, but to sue the person that they were seconded to.
On what basis?
On the basis that you're my employer, you conducted this disciplinary process in my case, you accused me of XYZ. Of course, the infraction was committed in the course of working for me, working within my organization. But regardless of that, you're not it doesn't make you my employee. And when you look at the agreement, so I mean, I'm getting into so many things now. So there are secondment agreements when somebody's been seconded to you and not your employee. There are contracts when the person is just a contractor and not your employee. I think bottom line is that regardless of how you characterize it or how you have it on paper, the only people you have an employment relationship with are the people that you have a contract of employment with. So if a person is your contractor, the person has been hired by your organization for a year, 18 months to perform some tasks, doesn't necessarily make the person your employee. The person is a contractor, and there are different rights and obligations in both relationships.
So let's talk about that, right? What are the different rights and obligations between an employee and the employer versus an employer and the contractor?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So with your employee, you have a contract of employment with them. You have an agreement with them.
Which you should. So step number one is
Step
you need
number
to
one,
have
yes,
an employment agreement
yes,
with them.
an offer which they should accept. They must. It's not even a should issue. It's a must. It's mandatory for them to accept, because that evinces an acknowledgement of the terms in that contract of employment. It shows that they've acknowledged and they've accepted the terms, to be bound by those terms. So in a typical offer for employment or a contract of employment, after the person who is offering the employment has reduced their terms into writing and signed off, say the HR manager has signed off, there'll be a portion there saying maybe name, address, signature, I, such and such, hereby accept the terms of this
The
contract of
agreement.
employment, yes, and they sign. That shows that they've agreed to be bound by the terms of that contract. And then you can see there's an employment relationship in place. There's a contract of employment in place.
So the offer letter is different from the employment agreement, and
it's the same thing. It can be one and the same.
It can be one and the same, but it could also be two separate documents, or is best
well,
to,
and it's yes, just one, because in that same offer, there's a portion for them to
sign,
accept
to
the
acknowledge
terms,
that they've
yes,
accepted
and
the
that
terms.
entire document is the contract. The same way when you have a normal, a regular contract, maybe a contract for supply of goods and services, you have all the parties to that agreement sign in the same document. You don't need to have a separate document.
Okay, that's clear.
And sorry, and some of them are headed offer of employment. Some of them are headed contract of employment. It's semantics.
It's the same thing.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's clear. Let's now talk about the employer contractor agreement.
Yes.
Right. What are some rights and obligations within that?
Sorry, I didn't actually state all the rights. And so, for example,
yes. So we'll still come back to break down the terms.
Okay.
The
okay. Right.
employee
in the employment relationship. Yeah. So with your contractor, you have an agreement with them as well, but that agreement will not be called an offer for employment or a contract of employment. No, it's not an employment. It's just a contract for
to deliver services.
Yes.
Or deliverables.
Yes.
Milestones.
It's just a contract, which would have like service level agreements to say what is expected of that person, the duration of that contract. Of course, I know that a lot of contracts are usually renewable, but that person is not your employee, and you're not responsible. They're not responsible to you in some aspects, and you're also not responsible to them in some aspects. So the rights and obligations differ from contract of employment. So for example, what they earn from you is not a salary. It's payment. They deliver an invoice to you, and then you pay them for their services.
So taxes, they're
you don't know. They declare their own taxes.
Declare their own taxes
yes.
to the government directly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. With your employee, they don't have to issue you an invoice. That will be problematic. Every month, or if it's a 30-month rolling salary basis, if it's a weekly, whatever it is that you have agreed with them, you pay them. You're obligated to pay them as and when due, and of course you then have your payee obligations where your tax is deducted at source, and you have a corresponding obligation to remit to the tax authorities. Yes.
So let's now discuss some key clauses that should be in an employment agreement that founders often don't think about or feel it may not be as important, right?
So in a contract of employment, the first thing is to state what's the terms of the offer. So the role that you're employing them as, of course, that role may change as your company evolves or as you promote them within the ranks. But each time there's a change in a role, the expectation is that you then give them a letter which will kind of restate the terms and the clauses in their contract of employment. It will state the salary, it will state the start date, it will state the termination clause. Termination is
it with
often,
notice or without notice? If
yes,
it's with notice,
you,
how
you
long
state
is
the
notice
probation period as well. Some people have a 1 month probation period. Some people have a 3 month. Some people have a 6 month probation period. Same as termination notice as well. For some people, so most termination clauses will be something like either party is at liberty to terminate this contract of employment with maybe depending on the
14
cadre.
days,
So some
30 days
people,
notice.
so the standard is usually 1 month, 1 month notice, right? But you find that sometimes, especially when someone is highly specialized or highly skilled,
Actually
you
want a
find that you
longer
want a
notice
longer notice period. So you might have something like 3 months.
You don't want your head of tech
Exactly,
to just
up and leave
away.
and say, and because usually contract of employment will have a payments in lieu of notice, such that if I can't wait out the notice period, I can't serve out that notice period, there should be an option for me to pay 1 month's salary in lieu of that period that I would have worked. And it works both ways. So I can decide to say, look, I no longer require your services, and you will need to leave, right? If I'm not giving that person notice and I say, look, you need to leave, today will be your last day, I have an obligation to pay that person 1 month salary in lieu of notice, or whatever is stated as the notice period. The amount, the length of time in that notice period, I have an obligation to pay the salary covering that period in lieu of notice. So if it's like a highly specialized person or a highly skilled person, it could be 3 months. It depends on what the contract says. But you
So it should be
determine
well
that.
documented. Now, from the employee's perspective, what rights do they have? Right? Because employees often feel that they are on the receiving end of a short stick and they don't really have a say or a choice, right? So the employer is the one that can, call the shots, name the terms, etc.
Before an employee accepts a contract of
They should be
employment,
comfortable with the terms in that
they should be
agreement.
comfortable with the terms. You can't turn around to say, oh, that's unfair. You signed it. Or I'm not happy with this. And I don't know that anyone compels anyone to accept
An employment,
offer.
Yeah.
You can say, you know what, you can have an employment contract that says your employer reserves the right to ask you to work on weekends and public holidays, even though public holidays are statutory for you to have the day off work, right? Work 3 days and all of that. But your employer may say, look, we require you to be here with or without overtime payments.
And want to sign that?
If you decide you want to sign it, then
yes. They're not paying me overtime
yes,
for working on Christmas Day.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's it. So one thing I would always say is that for an employee, you have a right to either accept or reject the terms of a contract of employment. You don't have to sign it. But with an employer, everything that you want to regulate your relationship needs to be there. And there are other side documents, so maybe like your staff manual, your code of conduct, and all your business manuals. You can list them, state them in your contract of employment, so that they're all binding on that employee. What is also important is there's a misconduct clause sometimes, because there's a difference between termination and dismissal.
What's the difference?
Yeah, termination is either party exercising their contractual rights
to end the agreement.
To end that agreement, to say this contract of employment has now come to an end, right? That's termination. I have a right to say, I terminate my contract of employment with you because I found a better offer somewhere and I'm leaving, and you can't hold me bound.
Now that's resignation, though, isn't it?
So it is resignation. I'm resigning, but the technical term for it is a termination.
Okay.
That contract, the bottom line of it is that contract of employment has been terminated. I may also decide to let you go.
As the employer.
Right? So in that case, I'm the one terminating it. The effect of me asking you to go, saying that your services are no longer required, is still a termination. That means either party is at liberty to bring a contract of employment to an end at any time.
Okay.
Dismissal, on the other hand, usually happens, it's at the option of the employer. And for something to lead to dismissal, it has to be that some kind of misconduct has happened on the part of the employee.
Now that's quite broad, because misconduct can be subjective.
So that's the thing. When you have your contract of employment, you have like your code of conduct, your staff manual, things that will constitute misconduct needs to be
should
clearly spelled out.
documented in there.
Yes, such that if a person is caught stealing company property or trying to defraud the company or even carrying on outside of the office in a way that does not properly represent that company or
relationships,
having a that should, well, I don't know, a company may decide that
that's okay.
we abhor relationships, and some may say it's
so
okay.
that's all in the company policy.
Yes, that should
what
all
the
be in your
company's
staff manual
position
or
is.
handbook. Yes. Once you step out of those things, so if it's a fraud, it may even be that the company says that we're a tech company, we're very serious-minded people, we will not tolerate staff members fooling around on apps, social media, or saying things about the company on social media, right? Or disclosing confidential information on social media. It should be clearly spelled out there that this will constitute acts such as, sometimes you have a page or even 2 pages covering acts, that listing out acts that would be classified as acts of gross misconduct.
It doesn't have to be about the company, right? I mean, there have been several cases where employees are behaving badly or making comments that are inappropriate. And the employer has the right to terminate.
I'll give an example. It may be a situation where a person has committed a crime, maybe defiled a minor or something. Now, that is not an act done against the company, but it's a reputational issue for the company that you're harboring a pedophile in your organization. The company may say, look, you know what, we will not tolerate this, and put it there. And once that happens, the company says, you know what, you've been caught doing this. Of course, there are disciplinary measures. There should be disciplinary measures in place as agreed between the company and its employees. And once you've gone through that disciplinary measure and all of that, say, regardless of what you say, not regardless of what you say, but we have gone through the disciplinary process and we believe that you did exactly, you committed certain acts that amount to gross misconduct under our code of conduct.
So even if it's not explicitly stated in the employer handbook, right?
So I mean, because most times it's inexhaustive, but there's so many things that can come up. Exactly. So you might have like an umbrella thing of anything that brings the company to disrepute,
correct,
or something that puts the company in bad light.
Founders should think about that, right? Have clauses that also cover edge
broad
cases
spectrum,
and broad spectrum and a range of things that may not be every day,
may not be your day-to-day. Yes. And in such a situation, it will be a dismissal. Once the person has been found guilty of committing an act of gross misconduct, the employer will have the option of dismissing the person, and in that case, the termination clause will not apply. So it won't be that you can dismiss immediately. Yes, immediately, summarily, without the 1 month. Yes, in fact, in that situation, the employee will not be entitled to any payments in lieu of notice or anything like that, because it's a straight up dismissal. Yes.
In the eyes of the law, what are the minimum rights that employees have? And that could be for benefits, for example. So maternity leave is one that sometimes comes up, right? Even just leave days, generally vacation days.
Yeah.
What are the minimum rights such that as an employee, if you don't see that in your contract, it may or should trigger some warning bells?
You should definitely look out for leave days. Again, no matter how onerous an employment contract is, parties are free to contract.
It supersedes the legal minimum. So let's say, for example, the federal law says you must give 3-month maternity leave.
Yes. Then
and the employer says, actually, in our company, we only do 1 month.
Yes.
Can the employer supersede?
So there's actually no federal law. There's no law, right, that regulates the agreement between an employer and the employee. Yes, in Nigeria.
So that's actually very good.
The only people who are bound by those laws are employees of government.
Okay.
So if government says that compulsorily, mandatorily, all agencies, maternity leave, in fact, I know in some states, I think in Lagos State, it's 6 months. If no agents agency of Lagos State can give you less than
Less
6
than
months.
6 months paid.
Yes, paid.
Yes. Okay.
But it doesn't affect what happens between private individuals. Individuals are entitled to contract freely on terms that they find acceptable. If you decide that you want to go and take up employment where they say, look, we work like horses here, no leave, no time off, only public. I know of
There are
countries.
companies, yeah.
I believe in the US, maternity leave
Yeah, it's
is
like
really
2 weeks.
abysmal.
It's
Exactly.
ridiculous.
I've heard it's
It
2
really is
weeks.
ridiculous.
Exactly.
Because in Europe, where you can
Where you
get
have
1
about, you can
year
get up to a
paid.
year.
Yeah.
Now
fully
in
paid.
Nigeria, I don't know that you can get up to a year, but I know the organizations that
Typically
range
give
between
3
3 months to
months,
6 months.
Yeah, paid.
So, yes. So that's why I'm saying that you need to look at your specific. So there's no minimum that is being prescribed by any laws. You just need to look at it and see what works for
See
you.
if that makes sense for
Yes.
you.
There's no, the only thing that the law mandates your employer to do
Your
is to pay your taxes and to contribute pension.
Government must collect their money.
Yes.
So let's talk about pension
Yes.
and how much is required by government for the employer to remit to government for pension on your behalf.
There's a percentage that's stipulated by the law
10%,
for monthly pension contribution. I'm not quite clear on that. I can't remember. But monthly pension contribution, you have to contribute to pension, and payee as well. That's your personal income tax has to be remitted on a monthly basis.
Irrespective of if you're a contractor or employee.
No, only an employee.
Only an employee
As a
pays
contractor, I don't have any obligation to pay their
They
pension
pay
or
their
anything.
own taxes.
They pay their own
and
taxes.
They take care of their own pension
Yes.
as they need.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's quite clear. You know, what are some pitfalls from an employment perspective that either employers or employees often don't consider or even have conversations on prior to signing that dotted line?
I think, in fact, sometimes employees don't even remember to
read
ask for contracts. So if startup starting in my living room, right, I could just say, look, I know you've got you're a really bright chap. I can bring you onto my team. You be my app developer. You're going to be my technical person. I have somebody else. You know what? You're going to help me with the finances. You're going to do my papers, my numbers, and everything. Just ensure that everything is all in place. And I get maybe a third person. Okay, so you be my marketing person, exactly.
Sales,
branding person. You're the one who is selling my business. Look, guys, you know we're family. I've known you guys forever. Look, just let's do this thing. No. It's wrong. And sometimes because they're bright and eager and they really want to do this thing, they just jump
Right
into your ship without even asking for a contract. And you may even agree, look, you know what? Let me just tell you how much I'm going to pay you. I'll send it to you via WhatsApp. I'll just text you. If it's okay by you, okay. I'll pay you 10 million a month. Is that fine by you? Oh yeah, that's more than fine. I was earning 6 where I'm coming from, and then you just accept it without even asking for a contract. That's the worst thing either the employer or the employee can do to themselves.
How often does that happen? How often do you actually see
that happen? It happens, especially where this kind of scenario that I've painted, where it's really just sort of informal conversations. Wasn't a formal recruitment exercise or anything like that. It was just a thing of I'm starting up. So you're going to be my employee. You're going to be my employee. You work for me now. You now work for XYZ Limited. This is what we do.
No. And I think, sometimes people also forget, right? Because you begin to build the business, things start to grow, you get busy with all kind of things.
And then you find that you don't have a contract.
You don't even remember that you never signed a contract until an investor comes in, or you're thinking, wait a second, what's going on here?
And it's not too late to have a contract, even if you forgot to do that at the outset of your business. Ensure that your employees have contracts. It's actually to protect you yourself as the employer, because if someone decides to sue you over something, so for example, saying I'm entitled, when you ask them to leave and they come and say I'm entitled to
X amount.
Yes.
Because you had promised
what
me
protects
10%,
you?
So you had promised me 20%.
The person says I'm entitled to a bonus. If there's nothing in your contract of employment that says that this person will be entitled to bonuses in the year that they leave, they can't come and sue you for bonuses. Let them go to court.
Now, how does the law typically see that, right? Do they give more of the rights to the employee or to the employer? So in this scenario you had painted where there was some informal conversation, I had promised you 10%, but it wasn't documented. you come back when you're leaving to say, hey, 10%, what's up? And I say, look, your performance does not justify 10%.
So in fact,
and we then go to court.
yeah,
right?
in fact, what typically happens is that with a lot of companies, there's in what you call like your staff manual or your code of conduct, it will usually state eligibility, talk about bonuses, and most of the time bonuses are discretionary, so they're not a right. It's not your monthly remuneration that you say that I'm entitled to X amount. Bonuses are not static, so you could earn a high bonus this year, earn a lower bonus next year. Bonuses are usually performance based, and it's even based on if a company decides we're declaring bonuses because we've made a profit. A company may record a loss in a year and say, look, we're not paying bonuses this year.
Yeah.
Right? So bonuses are not fixed. So that's why I said that an employer will be doing themselves a disservice if they don't have certain clauses in their contracts of employment. So bonuses and incentives are performance based.
So let's spend some time talking about contractor agreements. What's the best way to structure them? And what tips and tricks can you advise our founders as they think about having the right agreement in place with their contractors?
Right. With your contractors, as we identified earlier, they're not your employees.
Yeah.
So they're actually more independent in the sense that you don't own them, you don't own their time, right? You agree to a service, to them providing a service for a specified period,
Okay.
right? And then they then deliver to you based on whatever your agreement is. Of course, you agree remuneration for that service, right?
And they have your SLA in place
You have,
as well.
of course, you have your SLAs in place. So if you do X, you get X.
Which is your service level
agreements. Yes. So you have all of that in place. With your contractors, you don't have an obligation to pay taxes. They do the work, they invoice you, you pay them. That's typically how it works. And you have your contract for a fixed period. Such, of course, you also need to have a termination clause in your contract with your contractor. Either party also will should be entitled to terminate that agreement. And it could also be that your termination clause says that this contract is for a fixed term of 12 months and no party can terminate before
the contract term is over. So if you're doing a very critical, for example, tech integration, banking upgrade, you don't want your contractor
to just terminate, just up and leave midway and say I'm leaving.
Yeah.
So you need to have all those important clauses in place. You also need to, importantly, because they're not your employees, you need to have NDAs in place, non-disclosure agreements, because you might be doing
competitors.
Of course,
well,
sometimes
right? They're
they work
working
with
banks, multiple
yes,
banks.
yes, yes, and you don't have a right.
Fintechs,
Yes, you can't control who they work with.
Yeah.
So you need to have those NDAs in place such that if they can't disclose your trade secrets or the kind of work that they're doing with you to third parties. You also need to have so whereas in your contract of employment it'll be something like a non-compete clause, right? With your contractors it'll be more like an NDAs, and even when they're doing certain things that are similar with what they're offering to you, the service they're offering to you, they need to disclose. So you should disclose to you now, like a conflict of interest. Such needs to be disclosed to you. So you need to have those sorts of agreements in place, those clauses in place to protect you. You also need to ensure that they're guided by so if they're dealing with data, your client's data, for example, you need to ensure that you have data protection clauses in place to ensure that they're not disclosing that they're not disclosing your
who has access to the data.
Exactly, so that there's no breach.
You can
Absolutely.
see who has gone in, when they've gone in, what
Absolutely.
they've done, etc. That's all quite important.
Yes. Yes.
So founders also often say that, look, NDAs are great, but oftentimes they can't enforce it if things go wrong, right? Clearly, from a legal perspective, you see why that's important to have NDAs in place with your contractors. How do you respond to founders when they push back with the objection that, look, you can sign all you want, but if a contractor wants to go off to share trade secrets or share data, it's really difficult to then use the NDA to hold them responsible.
But you can sue them. You can sue them for breaching the NDA. if you specifically ask that the terms of your engagement are kept confidential and they don't disclose to anyone else, and you find that they've breached that, you have a right to sue them, even if, and you can sue them for the damage that they've done to your organization. If there's a reputational damage, and oh yes, you can sue them. So there's, I'll never advise a founder not to have an NDA in place.
So even if it takes time
Yes.
to get signed.
Yes.
Now, it gets a bit tricky when you're working with investors because you want to move quickly in case you're able to get some funding from them. It's taking a lot of time back and forth with the NDA. Clearly, the right thing to do is still to go ahead and push through with the NDA. But are there any other considerations?
Well, investors are they're not your typical contractors who are providing a service. So that's kind of in a different class.
So let's spend some time talking about probation period, both from the employee's perspective and the employer's perspective. Because employees sometimes feel that, look, I've quit a full-time job to join this organization to work with you. And now you're saying that you have the right within 3 months, 6 months, etc., right, to terminate. And the employer clearly feels, look, I want to see what you're able to deliver and have the option to terminate if things don't go as planned. I'm curious to know what the legal position is around probation clauses. What is best practice? What should founders keep in mind as they design their employment contract with potential employees?
Great. So with your probation period, typically it's 6 months for most contracts of employment. It's 6 months. But what employers tend to do is that such a person's contract of employment isn't confirmed, because contracts of employment usually will be confirmed at the end of the probation period. So if I've observed the person as a founder, as an employer for the period of 6 months, and I don't think that they cut it, or I don't think that the people I need to have on my payroll, there should be embedded in the termination clause should be the period, the notice period if an employee were to be on probation. You can actually terminate, which is different from after confirmation. Yes. So the notice period within the probation period would be something like 14 months. And in fact, this scenario 14 days. And this scenario you've painted, I've actually seen it play out once. I was representing an organization who had terminated a contract of employment within the probation period. Right, person had probably only worked, and person came and said, I have worked here, there, and 4 months into my contract of employment, and just like you said, I left gainful employment, to come here. But the person probably talked a good talk at the point of interview with all these certificates, and then got on the job and just failed to perform, right? So within that probation period, the person was actually asked to leave. But rather than a 1 month notice period, it was a 2-week notice period. And the employer then decided to take it a step further by paying the person for the 2 weeks in lieu of notice. But the person was actually terminated about 4 months into the employment. So it's well within the employer's rights. And likewise, an employee may also be, in their notice period, may say, what, this place is toxic. I can't deal. I don't have a life anymore. I used to be able to go to see the movies and all that on weekends, but I typically don't have a life. My mental health has taken a beating. It's true.
It's true.
And say, what, this is still my probation period. I quit. Yes.
2 weeks notice.
So I'll serve out my notice period for 2 weeks and I'll leave even a month into the probation. So it's at the option of either the employer or the employee. So it's actually very important to state the terms of your probation period in your contract of employment.
So in certain cases, we all know how expensive things have gotten. Laptops now cost what, like over 3 million naira in some cases.
Yeah.
They've gotten quite ridiculous.
Mm.
So in some cases, startup founders, they're still very early. They're trying to figure out how to bootstrap this business. They cannot afford to buy some of these work tools for their employees. And they often then ask their team members to come with their own devices.
Yeah.
What consideration should founders keep in mind in such a scenario?
Right. Okay. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking your employees to use their own devices, but as a founder, you need to have safeguards in place. And I'm not an IT specialist, but I believe that as a founder, you need to have virus firewalls and all those things in place where employees are using their own devices. But more importantly, is to ensure that you're not breaching data protection regulations, because startups usually sometimes they serve as data banks. They're collecting information from their customers and third parties. You need to be sure that even though that employee is using their own personal device, they're not breaching rules, and you should make them sign those data privacy agreements as well.
We've seen cases where employers put tracking devices on laptops because they want to see if the employee is spending time on social media half the day, if they're going to non-appropriate websites, or just trying to
on their own devices,
on the company devices.
On company devices, of course, the employer is at liberty to do that.
So that's actually quite key to make it clear that when you are using the company's device, the employer has the right to implement tracking device to monitor
what the employees
so that's
are
not
doing.
against the law.
It's not an invasion of my privacy, because it's a work tool. It's not my personal computer. Although I think that I would have an issue if my personal computer was being tracked, because I have my personal transactions, my bank and all that stuff on my own personal computer. So, but if it's the company's device, they're at liberty to do so, but the employee needs to know that they're being
So that was the next question, right? The employer has the right to track. Do they also have the right to disclose that they're tracking?
I believe they have an obligation to disclose. Yes.
Okay, they do. So that's the law.
So the person knows. It's the same way if I'm on a call, if I get on a Zoom call, something, and you need to record me. Whilst I may not object to you recording me, but you need to let me know. You need to seek my consent. Yes, before you record the conversation, even when you know that I won't object to it being recorded. So it's the same principle. Yes.
Okay. And in cases where the employer doesn't disclose, then
it could lead to problems.
Yeah, down the line.
Down the line, yes, because if your money. However, having said that, it will be very difficult for an employee to win, because when you say invasion of privacy, what privacy are you? Yes, you should be using the work tool for work and not to be applying for other jobs or visiting sites that you shouldn't be visiting.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fantastic. We have unpacked a lot in this conversation, but we also have a few questions from our audience.
Okay.
Can we quickly pop into that?
Sure.
And I think we've discussed some of this, but let me just ask the questions anyway, just for the sake of giving voice to our audience questions. Okay, the first one says, "Hi Periscope, many founders assume a verbal offer is enough for early hires. What are the subtle pitfalls of skipping formal contract, and what clauses actually prevent disputes later?"
It's important to have a written agreement in place. The written agreement actually protects both parties. The employer knows what rights they have in relation to that hire and what their responsibilities are. Because it's not in all cases that employees sue the employers. The employer too has a right to sue the employee if the employee breaches their agreement. But if you don't have anything in writing, if it's just verbal, then we're just here vibing. We don't know what our obligations and rights are. So it's important for both parties, actually. It protects both parties when you have a written agreement.
Okay, great. Next one. Probation periods often create tension, as we had discussed earlier. What's the most effective way to set performance criteria? And this is a bit away from legal, but let's complete the question. What's the most effective way to set performance criteria and exit terms that are fair, measurable, and legally safe?
So I believe performance criteria will be set by your HR, and even if you don't have an HR department or an HR team, you can always outsource HR and have an HR practitioner properly help you put in place your KPIs and performance measures in place, and even appraisals that will help you measure that employee's performance. But having said that, regardless of an employee's performance, the bottom line in a contract of employment is that either party has a right to terminate it. The obligation that an employer has and a founder has is to ensure that when they're terminating a contract of employment, they're doing it in the termination is done in accordance with the terms of the contract of employment. I'll give you an example. If I terminate and I decide I want to pay 1 month salary in lieu of notice, because that is no. Let me backtrack. If I'm terminating someone's contract of employment, but the notice period says 3 months. And I know that I don't want the person to serve out the notice period, maybe because there's too much tension between us and I just can no longer work with that person, no matter how highly skilled the person is. I have an obligation to pay 3 months salary in lieu of notice. I can't say, look, you know what, I'm just going to pay you something you're entitled to for 1 month or 2 months. That person has a right to sue me. And if the person sues me, the court will find that the contract of employment was wrongly terminated and the person will be entitled to damages. So it's important to ensure that whilst you're terminating a contract of employment, it is done according to the terms of the agreement between you and your employee.
Fantastic. All right, let's take one last one.
Sure.
Okay. Small teams handle sensitive data and code without full IT or legal department. What are the critical minimum policies or agreements that founders absolutely cannot skip on day one?
You need to have your data protection, your data privacy agreements in place. You need to have your confidentiality agreements in place as well. They're different things, right? So data relates to what you do with the information that you receive in terms of other people's information, but you also have an obligation to keep confidentiality in all the work that you do. So even if you don't have a proper team structure or anything, they need to sign that whatever I encounter in the course of this my work, I'm not going to go out there on the streets of social media and start yapping about them or even selling trade secrets to competitors or my would-be employers.
Fantastic. This has been such an enriching conversation, Tosin. I think we've really just dissected all elements of an employment contract, both for regular full-time employees, but also for contractors as well. And thank you so much for your insights and sharing from your wealth of knowledge with our audience.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate the conversation.
I had a good time doing this. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for watching this episode. Hope you're able to get some valuable nuggets of wisdom, and see you next time. Please follow us on our social media platforms. You can send us questions on our website. If you go to the website, www.periscope.media, scroll down, you'll see a section, like a Slido section where you can add questions. Please reach out to us with all those questions. We'd love to take them on subsequent episodes. Follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, periscope.podcast, Twitter @perismedia, and Instagram, periscope.podcast. Okay? Looking forward to hearing more from you, and thanks so much for your time.